My name is Gravity, and on this episode of the Battlefield Show, Julian and I discuss the history of Battlefield content and minor changes from Battlefield 2042 patch 4.0.1. Next, PC Gaming publishes an article saying that 2042 is good now. How does the panel feel about this? Post-launch content in the live service era. Is it worth it for games to focus on microtransactions and skins as the primary money-making assets? Joining us this week to discuss all these topics and more is a content creator, YouTuber, and one of the pillars of the Battlefield community, Flakfire. This is the Battlefield Show.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Battlefield Show. I'm here joined by Gravity, my lovely co-host. Welcome back, welcome back. And we're also joined here by Flakfire, a legendary Battlefield community member and a YouTube extraordinaire, talking about Battlefield for how long has it been now? Like decades, huh?
No, not quite that
Has it
long.
been like almost a decade? No.
It's coming up on that. I think I really started doing Battlefield stuff in like 2016. So,
Oh, okay.
Really? You only started around BF4 or 1?
Well, in terms of doing content and stuff like that, I think it went to 2015. I've been playing it since 1942. So it's been a while. But in terms of doing YouTube and content and that kind of stuff, 2015, 2016, somewhere around there has been the original date.
Well, I feel like I've known you for forever. Last time you were on the show was 3 years ago. I just pulled up the old broadcast we had that we did live on Twitch a long time ago, where you you broke your glasses.
Probably.
Those are
They're
the same.
broken right now, actually.
Same side. Yeah, it's the same glasses.
It's probably the same glasses, actually. No, I'm supposed to get that fixed actually, like next week. So we'll see how that goes.
Hey, 3 years. I mean, it's fine. It only took that much.
Only took 3 years.
So last time we talked, you were. Well, I wanted to get your history background and why you brought up all this historical facts and why you spoke German so well. And we discussed that you were an instructor at a college. So are you still doing that?
Still doing that right now. Yes.
Oh, right. So how's the new semester, I guess? Or I guess it's ended wrapping up, huh?
We're on spring break right now. So
right.
In general, yeah, I mean, it's going well. It's been real interesting to see kind of the way COVID has impacted the student base and their motivations and, how invested they are in classes, what their goals are, that kind of stuff. So it's been real interesting to see. And I finally feel like things are kind of getting back to normal for them. So it's been nice. It's been a good.
So you guys are you're back in. That last semester, you guys were back in, and everyone was present.
Yes, and pretty much for us, we never left. Really, we had like one semester of like all remote, and then it's been either hybrid or in class the whole time.
That's great. Did you ever change up your curriculum or had new ideas to introduce more stuff?
Necessity. Because you had some instances where it's like you're trying to teach someone how to do video and audio production, like remotely. And that's very complicated. It's also something of like, I really need to have you in the classroom so I can make sure that not only that you're learning how to edit, right, but that you're learning how to do all of these processes properly. Because it's a very detail-oriented kind of training. Right. And it's like, if I tell you to do something, there's like 100 different ways you can do it. Right. Fortunately, there's only like a couple of ways to do it right. And I need to make sure that you're doing that properly.
Okay. And I was going to ask you, 3 years ago when I was talking to you about this, you always wanted to bring in a fun way of training people, or a fun way of bringing education. You put a term on it, something like fun-ucation or something like that.
Edutainment.
Edutainment, yes, that's
Edutainment
it.
is a real word. I didn't invent it. It's a real word.
Oh my god, I didn't even know that either. So did you progress in I don't know, upgrading your education?
Edutainment? Yeah, no.
Edutainment?
I would say so. Like a big thing for us when we're talking video and audio editing, and especially if you have a more traditional program of like, oh, we're doing radio and television, and it's kind of stuff that nobody really wants to do anymore. How do you make it more engaging, interesting, and valuable to students? So there are certain things like, for example, I have had students edit together like short form content that's been shot vertically. So
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay, this mimics exactly what you would be doing for producing a YouTube short or a video on TikTok, Instagram, etc., that kind of stuff. And so for them, and we'll talk about the creative process and why you write something a particular way and why something is edited a particular way and blah blah blah. But it's far more applicable for what their more modernized goals are, and it's kind of on the university to someday maybe
Right.
upgrade to like, oh yeah, people don't people don't really go into radio anymore. They don't go into television. Everybody wants to be a content creator, be their own boss, or they're producing media for social media. And so I try to, they give me some freedom with what I can do, and I take every ounce of that to try and make it valuable, useful to students in the classroom.
So
Has
now,
I was
go
gonna
ahead,
say,
Gravity.
has your experience with content creation regarding Battlefield, or even seeing what other content creators do, influenced your courses and curriculum, the way you teach?
Oh, absolutely. Especially from the point of view of, you look at what is successful, um, and defining what that is, looking at how things are constructed, and okay, how do we emulate that? What are some good decisions that this person made when they were making this content? It's also fun for me because I can visually showcase success to students, right, from a personal standpoint of like, this video that you're editing right now, these are the rough files that I had, and I made this video, and it did like 8 million views on YouTube. So they can actually get hands-on with content that has performed in the past. They can interrogate why it performed. They can interrogate what it takes to, put this stuff into a video, everything that you got to gather and, do properly. And you have something that you can hold up to them and be like, if you can do this, you can be successful. You just have to, stick with it, be aggressive, be reflexive in terms of looking at, feedback and how did all of this stuff perform and why did it perform that way. So there's a lot of that, but it's also really beneficial for them because I can talk about, hey, this video made X amount of dollars, so that you can demonstrate for them this is a feasible career. If you go into that and you pursue it and, you're hungry and you look for ways to do it, I have the luxury, and I tell them this, that I don't have to depend on YouTube and stuff for money because I have a full-time job. Everything that I do on YouTube is a hobby. It's for fun, and it's maybe a more serious hobby than some people have, but
Sure.
um, just being able to illustrate for them that it's like, yeah, no matter what your parents say, like this can be a career if you want it to be. But I can teach them how to build that stuff together. I can't teach them like the grind. I can't teach them that. They got to have that in them.
Mhm.
Yeah. And for YouTube Shorts, did you ever explore that, or just shorts in general, like TikToks and whatnot? You still
Um,
going with that?
oh yeah, yeah. It's been wonderful. I've really pushed that pretty hard the last 4 or 5 months.
Oh, good.
And it's resulted in, at least on YouTube, growth of about 25, 30,000 subscribers, which, considering what my bread and butter is, a Battlefield, the
Right.
state the game has been in, um, seeing that kind of subscriber growth, and interest and interaction has been awesome. I also started TikTok during that time period, which I swore I would never do, but I was like, whatever,
Yes.
I'll try TikTok. And that's grown up to about 27,000
Oh,
followers in that
nice.
span of time as well. And it's been nice because it's the same content on each platform, you know?
Oh, yeah. Right. Do you have
S-
a different approach to it now? Is it just
It's kind of
similar to your
solidified.
main videos?
They're right. They're less than 60 seconds. So I
Right.
tend to like really embracing some of the things I've done in the past on other videos. So like details or historical things or stuff like that. And it's just a fun
Uh-huh.
challenge for me. Let me cram it into 60 seconds,
Right.
and I like that. It goes back into my uh, kind of early career as a news reporter and a news anchor, and just focusing on keeping things 60, 90 seconds and putting together a nice little video package. And it's funny, I always swore I'd never do it again, and then I'm right back into it. So
So your best route right now, or what's performing the best? Like
shorts.
highlight clips?
Um,
I no, I mean the type of shorts, like clips, like
the
highlights, or your
the kinds of content that demonstrates knowledge not necessarily commonly known by the audience. So they tend to be things that, highlight an Easter egg, or they highlight an aspect of the game that maybe people did not know that much about. So I did one the other day on the lunge mine in Battlefield 5, and just talked a little bit about it, what it was for, understanding that, it came rather late in Battlefield 5's life cycle. Some people may not have known about it.
yeah.
And there is an audience out there that is, excuse me, really interested in the historical aspect of stuff. They may never have played Battlefield 5, but they are familiar with the lunch mine, and just the fact that it's been put into a game is fascinating to them. And they can see how it's used, and they can see how it functions in the context of the game. So like that kind of stuff for them is really interesting.
Hmm.
That tends to see a lot of views. The highlights, not so much.
Okay.
I don't really do them that much anyway. Um, and I think it's also something to clarify that, the audience doesn't necessarily expect highlights. They expect, fun little factoids or
Okay.
kind of news updates, that kind of stuff. Um,
So what about 2042?
yeah.
Is there a challenge there?
I
Coming up with
certainly think
ideas.
there is, especially from the point of view, right? If you look at Battlefield 5, Battlefield Hardline, those are historically oriented games. So you're dealing with, history that I can compare and contrast. Like, what's it look like in the game versus what's it look like here? And 2042 is a bit tougher because I don't have that. Right? All of the lore is basically fictional. There's some stuff that you can tie into some features and things that you can highlight in the game. Um, and it's something here. We're probably going to talk about it in a minute, but for the
Yeah.
early part of 2042's life cycle, um, doing content on the game was difficult from the standpoint of, not only did it not get very many clicks, right? It also did not generate necessarily positive interaction. So I might get comments
Mm.
on something, and it was never critical of me. It was always critical of the game, the state of
Like
the
fix
game,
your
design
game.
choices. Yes, exactly.
Like every
Um,
time Battlefield posts anything on Instagram, it's the first 5 comments is fix your game, fix your game, fix your game, and your game sucks, and so on and so
yeah,
forth. And like, oh my
yeah,
god, it just doesn't stop.
it's difficult. And
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons, there's an audience out there that likes the content that I do because it generally tends to be positive.
Okay.
I say that in the point of view of like, like we play games to enjoy ourselves and relax, and not everybody wants to, get offended or upset about something. Some of us just want to play the game. right? So I try
Exactly. Yeah.
to cater to that from the point of view of like, I can tell you things about the game like you didn't know, and maybe that helps you enjoy the game a little bit more. There's also some of the content that I've done on 2042 is sort of a shared grief kind of content, is the way I like to describe it.
Sure. Yeah. Why not?
And it really serves two purposes. Number one is to, validate your feelings about the game, where you're like, this isn't where it should be, or I don't like this. And then the second purpose is to get you to kind of laugh about it, so you feel seen, that you're sharing in that experience with other people. Right. So I did the one that's like where this guy has this flashback. And two guys talking to each other. One of them, how are you doing? How are you doing? I'm doing great, but my girlfriend broke up with me, and then the other guy says, yeah, that's just how it works out sometimes. And then it just goes into this flashback of, the angel voice lines. Um, and it's just kind of the Vietnam black and white flashback stylized kind of thing. And it's just like, it pokes fun at the fact that like nobody really likes this, but we have to deal with it. And it's kind of become, a way that we collectively cope with, how things are. And obviously, since that point in time, a lot of changes have been made. The game, I think, arguably, you could say, has changed direction. Um, and I think that there's going to be more space now to do more of that positive kinds of content and to have more constructive conversations around 2042 and where it's going to go in the future.
Yeah. It definitely seems. Well, they were talking about all chat coming back, and I just want to like get a
So that's the
quick
video.
reaction from you. Oh yeah, this is what in the world is this?
You gotta watch it sometime. It's great. It's great.
Hey man, how you
No,
been?
but
How's it
talking
going?
all chat.
It's going all right. My
Um,
girlfriend broke up with me,
all
so
chat. I'm excited to
yeah.
see. Again, I think it's just wild that we've had to reintegrate a bunch of stuff that was core to other Battlefield games. We look at it, and I think there's probably the idea that we've forgotten about some of this stuff, but it's like when the game came out, there was no scoreboard.
Yeah,
And it's like,
wild.
why? What's my motivation to play the game if the points are made up and nothing matters, right? The whose line is it anyway kind of scenario here. But so that being added, I think was good. Bringing back all chat, I think is good. I'm
Yeah. Okay.
mainly a console guy, so I don't really care about all chat so much. Whenever that gets thrown out there, a lot of times it tends to be rude comments from, one team to the other team. Like this guy at the back of the map, I hate this guy, like, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and but it's kind of nice, if you use that as a force for good, right? It can be a very beneficial thing. It can be super wholesome, and I like that potential exists there.
Yeah. Exactly. Grab, you want to ask away?
I just want to follow up with the all chat thing. I think it's fantastic that it's coming back, and just on that notion that it can be a force for good, I have seen it over the decades, be exactly that. Like, yeah, maybe 70% of the time it's trash talking and cheat accusations, whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
there's also that that ability for a all chat to say, for people to genuinely ask questions and get genuine answers back from the other from players server wide. Hey, I need help with this. Okay, let me meet me over this flag, or help me understand what downloads I need to make this game or map work. And they'll be very, very, yeah, it's there is a legitimate reason to have it in there other than just bashing or poking fun at people. I'd like to know, since you said you've played pretty much since 1942, what
Mm-hmm.
Battlefield game in the past have you had the most experience with and the best experience with?
That's a tough question to answer. most experience with and best experience with. Like I love games like Battlefield Hardline. I talk about Hardline all the time, but if you're looking like the most and the best experience with, it's probably cut between Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5. Battlefield 1 was really, there was a lot of growth with the channel associated with that. I got to do some really cool stuff, meet some really cool people, be involved in a game that I love, and see parts of history kind of come to life on the screen. And like, that's really exciting to me. With Battlefield 5, there was some behind the scenes involvement that I had, which I don't know if I'm still NDA'd, so I'm not going to I'm not going to talk about it. But there was much more personal involvement in that game. And I'll say at least like I have a dev tag for Battlefield 5 for a reason.
Okay.
And that game was unique in terms of the involvement that I had. And I really liked where the game was headed. Before, unfortunately, they said, okay, we're gonna cut support for this, and we're gonna, move on to the next thing. But I say that as well, like the gameplay of Battlefield 5, like the gunplay of it, I really like that. Um, just the way that it worked, I like that a little bit better than Battlefield 1. And still, I'm playing Battlefield 5 sometimes instead of 2042 because I'm like, yes, stuff just works. Like I can do what I want. The movement system is more fluid. And it's to me an enjoyable game. If you can look past some of the PR faux pas and stuff like that, then um, those two were probably among the big favorites.
Okay, I like that. Just out of curiosity, a lot of people nowadays, especially people who have played a lot of the Battlefield games going back to the Refractor Engine game, there's a notion that we put past Battlefield games up on a pedestal, that they can do no wrong. Do you concur with like the notion that certain games like Battlefield 3 were just the best of that era, or do you kind of follow the notion that yeah, they were good, but they were extremely flawed as well? And playing back, there might be a lot of nostalgia goggles going on.
I do think that nostalgia goggles are 100% real, especially when we talk about some of those games. But I also think that we have to look at them in the context of what was the norm, and what was available at the time. Like you look at Bad Company and Bad Company 2. If you go back and play those games, they are incredibly slow. They are very slow. They are very clunky, kind of that. And I'm not saying that to badmouth anybody because it was, performing to the norm at that time and the limitations of the technology, and it's like, I think that's something that you have to take into account. If you look at things like Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, like I feel like nostalgia goggles come into, more play there. Because Battlefield 4's launch, for example, was very problematic. And time heals all wounds in that way, right? You ask them, Battlefield 4 was the best game. I'm like, yeah, do you remember the first 6 months? Because I do. That I have not forgotten. And we can say the same thing about 2042 right now. With the whole first year. And all of the changes in the state that it launched in, and just everything going off in different directions. But 5 years from now, we're going to be like, Battlefield 2042 really got a bad rap, and we're going to forget
You're already seeing that. You're already seeing that.
100% already seeing that.
You are. But I think if you look at the core of the games, like Battlefield 3, for example, Battlefield 4, the core of the game was good. Bad Company 2, core of the game was good. Hardline, fight me on it. It was good. You may look at it as like, it's not a Battlefield game. That's fine. It was still a good game. But you qualify those statements with, for the time. Like it was good for the time, or all things considered. Or by the time the next game came out, it was it was good. And I think that's a kind of a testament and indictment of developers and publishers at the same time too, where it's just like, yeah, they're good at getting games to where they need to be, just not at launch. And we've seen that demonstrated, year after year after year after year, not just with DICE and associated studios, but others in the industry, right? You look at Cyberpunk, for example. That's one that it's being talked about very positively now, right? They have the Game of the Year edition, and people are like, "Oh, it's amazing!" And it's like, yeah, we should probably remember the first few months of that, and the what was the PS4 and Xbox, uh,
Yeah,
whatever versions of the game, and the
they
stuff
they
that we just
simply didn't
sweep under
run.
the rug. We're like, we
Yeah.
don't talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that stops too, going forward with the last gen consoles. I mean, it's over, man. Like, let's just move on. And I doubt the next Battlefield game will include PS4 and older. I just don't think that's gonna happen anymore. Um, Especially with new engines coming out, like Unreal Engine
hmm
5, like it's just they're not going to be able to handle it anymore. And hell, 2042 right now can barely handle PS4 and the older Xbox. I had
Yeah,
my
when you look at
friend,
the player limitations, player count
yeah,
limitations.
yeah, and just that alone. But that stuff that you saw where McKay's face is all polygon and everything, that's still happening. Like right now, if you tried it right
I
now,
love it. It
everybody,
it gives it personality. I
the
love that
lips,
stuff.
it's the lips, it's the curvy.
There are some bugs
Oh
that
my
just
god.
make a game. Ragdoll physics, weird, weird things like that. They just, yeah, I would never want those to go away. Yeah.
And with the major like we're talking about the after a year or so, things are all starting to come back together again, just like in Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5. We started getting new maps in Battlefield 5 that were actually something we liked, like infantry focus. So what was that
Yeah.
last map in Battlefield 5 that was infantry focus,
Al
kind of like in the
Marsh.
desert?
Al Marsh.
Al Marj,
Yeah.
people love the heck out of that. It was actually starting to go in a
I
good direction,
I personally really, it's not infantry focused specifically, but Provence. Like Provence in Battlefield 5. I love that map.
Yeah,
It's a
apparently
solid map.
yeah,
And
it
and
had
that
so
one
many
was, well, it was initially
right.
from, what was it, like, not, I don't think it was incursions, was it? Or whatever
No,
the
was
little
it?
thing. It was like the smaller game mode.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
And
yeah.
we were
yeah.
really adamant. We
Yeah,
were
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Dude,
yeah. It
you
was
gotta
one of
make this
those
64 players.
trios.
You gotta make it 64 players because it's so good." Right? The other one that they didn't do anything was Lofoten Islands. And that one's still kind of that weird map that it's like it's the secret hidden map and you can't play it unless you play this specific mode.
Mhm.
But Provence made it in there, and yeah, like Al Marsh encampment. Um, it's a fun map, yeah, especially for infantry, and there's technically light vehicles on that map, technically.
Yeah, technically, yeah. And then same thing for Hardline as well. Hardline in the past started getting really good for me, but there wasn't a player base at that time,
hmm
especially when Alcatraz map came
Yeah,
out and that whole bundle. I mean, fantastic maps, like all California based maps,
yeah.
Pacific Coast Highway, like, and it had so many cool little Easter eggs on that and Levolution
Mhm.
events. And they really started going. I was like, these are great, but all my servers are empty and I'm so sad. And like it came a little too late once again, just like a year later, things started to come together and we're right back in it. Bad decisions were made in 2042. A lot of people are like, this isn't Battlefield. Like I can't even do all chatter. There's no server browser, there's no class system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
It's like this doesn't feel like Battlefield. But then when I see this PC Gamer article running around,
Yeah.
and every developer is retweeting it because it is 100% positive vibes. Like this is, oh my god! Like what was one of the quotes from this guy here? He was like, I cannot overstate how good 2042's class system is, particularly because it's not just a reversion to the classic Battlefield. right? Which is what people wanted. At
Yeah.
first they even wanted to get rid of specialists altogether. But realistically, I don't think that was ever going to happen. But I mean, I would love to get your thoughts, Flack, on the class system that they brought back,
Well,
and
I'm gonna
what's going on
say,
with that.
first of all, from the point of view, like if I was a dev, right, and somebody came out with a positive piece about 2042, I would absolutely retweet it.
Yeah,
From the
why
point of
not?
view, like I'm glad, there's some positive press about the game and that, they put a lot of work into reorganizing and revamping that specialist system. I wish they wouldn't have had to do it in the first place, but hey, they put a
Right.
lot of work into it. I will give them that pat on the back that it's like, all right, given everything considered, you tried to listen to the fan base and get it to a place where there could be a good compromise, and um, I'm happy to see that. Now, was the question, what do I think about the article or what?
The class system in general, not the article.
Okay. The class system, I had some concerns about it initially because I looked at it and I'm like, it just kind of seems like an unnecessary complication.
Right.
And I was worried because we look at it's like games like this, they often really function on simplicity. And, there's a reason for that. It's much easier to balance something if it's inherently more simplistic, right? And my biggest concern was like, is stuff going to be broken when it comes out? You know,
Yep.
is there just going to be like this meta that it's like it's impossible to get over this? And I think they were able to balance that relatively well. Um, they just put out some updates, right? They nerfed the new grenade launcher. There's some other things that got tweaked a little bit, but um, in general, I mean, looking at it here, the class system, it functions better than I thought it would.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I would say I prefer it over the previous one. I will say it does kind of give me a chance, I think, to, from a psychological standpoint, like more enjoy the specialist from the point of view of like, I don't feel like I'm being forced to play, like a character that maybe like I don't connect with. you know
Right.
um and I kind of feel like I have some choice, and I feel like some of the choices are more meaningful. Like, okay, I'm gonna choose Falk because it makes sense to use her because I want to be able to use a little Surette pistol. um and I can choose some other things that maybe I couldn't have before. And I think probably the biggest thing for me is that it delivered on the readability of enemies and teammates. So like I know if somebody's likely to have ammo or a health crate, or has the ability to heal me, whereas before like that wasn't a thing. Or that I know if I see a character model what they're probably working with in terms of gadgets and weapons, right? Because we have the specialist of, I forget the term that they use, but um, right, it's like the support players have the bonus to SMGs, right? So I see a
Hmm.
support player and it's like, oh, they're probably going to be using an SMG. I don't necessarily know that, but I can kind of make tactical decisions
Proficiencies.
based
Yeah,
on that.
that's
Yeah,
it.
proficiencies. Yeah. Um, and I think that was a big addition that gets overlooked. Everybody's like, "Yay, classes are back." I'm like, "Yay, classes are back so I can better read what is happening on the battlefield."
I think
Because
to I think to an extent that works, but there's also you have negatives like unlike past class systems, there's no weapon restrictions. So you
yes.
absolutely most of the time could have recon players mostly running ARs, and you don't really see them running as snipers anymore. It pretty much could be any class that runs snipers in this game. And then
It
the
can.
proficiencies, sure, I feel like they were tacked on as best as they could in order to give it a little
Yeah.
flavor. But there's giving the engineer class the support prone proficiency of LMGs when it's just like, hey, here's your Boris with the Boris turret prone next to his turret with a laser beam across the map is kind of a little rough at times,
Yeah.
but it
It's odd
yeah
sometimes.
it definitely
Yeah.
adds flavor to the class system. Yeah.
It does, and again, I feel it's more readable than it was. And I think one of the topics that we're going to mention here a bit today is like, it's more readable than it was, but does that make it good? Right? Like
Well,
that
yeah.
idea of like, yeah, the classes are back, and we appreciate that, like, but should they have ever left in the first place?
Right. There's a really good quote in the PC article that comes from a new player, or at least a uh annoyed player at the time. He's like, there's a calming effect to this new class system here, because back when every specialist could use any gadget, I'd feel the constant pressure to swap my med pack or armor plates for an objectively more useful gadget such as a rocket launcher. And I totally relate to that, even though that's
Yeah.
so superficial to a
I
person
I
like me
don't
that
think
plays
that's
every day.
superficial at all. I don't think that's
Yeah,
superficial at all. I think that's a really good point there, and it's 100% true. And,
yeah,
I
I
think
ran to that all the
as
time, and I play every day.
yeah, and as a result of that, I think, for the people who play vehicles, it's improved their experience. I think it, also for me as somebody like, I just kind of looked at like the characters, like they don't really mean anything to me. They did not have a strong enough personality. And I say that not only in terms of like, this is just how it works out sometimes, like not that kind of personality, like the gameplay
Right.
personality and like how they function. Um, I feel like the changes involved in the class system helped crystallize, you know, it helped make them mean something. Like, is it still 100% where I want it to be? No, probably not. But, I look at it, I'm like, I really have been using McKay lately. And, before the class update, I did not like him at all. I just used Irish
Right.
for everything.
Mhm.
And I think that accurately reflects as well, the missiles and the grenades and like all of these other things that everybody turned to, made him indispensable. And I had no other option. I felt like I had to play him all the time because it's like my team is dumb and they don't know what they're doing. And I have to protect them. So I would always choose Irish to help out with that. And under the new class system, I don't feel like it's necessarily that way. And yeah, I'd agree. I can kind of connect with the specialists more now that the class system is back, which seems kind of counterintuitive, but I do agree with the statement there that
Yeah,
the
I mean,
person
and
that wrote the article had.
yeah, and then the author goes on to a little bit later in the article, says, quote, the new old class structure is welcome, but the specialists add a lot of variety too. The newest assault guy, Zane, is great. His signature gadget is an airfoil launcher like the one Sam Fisher used to lug around. What a reference there. That can lock onto a designated distance and explode midair to tag players hiding behind cover. I enjoy that even if I don't get much use from his situational gadget. I always benefit from his passive that triggers and heal after getting a kill. So yeah, there's people are starting to go into more different specialists that are now in these other categories that they would never pick ever,
Yeah.
right? And but we were talking with FPS Fletch, who's another streamer, and he brought up the example that because of the class system, now I feel like there's less variety because I know what each one he's played a lot, right? So he knows
Mhm.
what each one can bring to the table. And now that there's a class system, now I feel a little bit more restricted. Now, the best assault players, arguably just McKay, or the best engineer is arguably just Boris, at the time. We don't know how that's going to progress later on. And then now a lot of people are saying that Blasco's the best recon because
Mhm.
of her passive ability, and won't even dare to try any of the others because they already know they're not going to get at that advantage. So now there's less. Now there's, you have all this variety, but you really don't, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I thought it was an interesting point, but What
Yeah,
did you guys think about that?
I think a lot of stuff like that, it's it's the newest, latest, and greatest kind of thing, and people are gonna get to play that and find out that it's like it's useful in some situations, but I'd much rather choose this other character. Um, and that's kind of been my experience so far. Like it's certainly useful. I think we might see a nerf at some point. I think Blasco's radius is too big right now for blocking out stuff. But uh, you know, uh, again, I think the way that it's set up now lets people more easily explore some of the other things. That's personally how I feel. Um,
Right.
and again, I do feel like they mean more than they
Yeah.
did previously.
Yeah, because there's something like the article said, it brings an extra, what did they say? Like a spice, or like something's like a little bit more exciting going on, instead of the classic class system we had in BF3 and 4.
Yeah.
This brings something a little bit more to your passive ability and your special gadget.
Yeah.
It's kind of like mixing the old with the new.
The thing is,
This is the new direction.
I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, a specialist system was needed to make that happen in the first place. You absolutely could have added some sort of unique passive that a player could choose for between the class system anyway, and have that inherently. Yeah, I don't think that was the grandest thing. I mean, this article in itself is nice from a very, very casual perspective, right? There's from an outside Battlefield perspective, this gives a lot of appreciation to the developments that the game has made. But on the flip side, there's things like, I love all 4 maps that have been added since launch, and from a more dedicated perspective, you go 4, right? You go that's terrible. There's a railgun now, configured to a shotgun, ridiculously cool. I don't know where they got shotgun from.
Probably the burst,
there's
maybe.
Talking about Liz. Oh yeah, I'm obsessed with mastering Liz. Well, there's balance issues. So much, because she's the topic of still so much conversation. I didn't see the big deal about scoreboards when 2042 launched without one. That is a whole can of worms. Now that there is one, I do enjoy comparing my stats against everyone else. This exactly goes back to what Flak just said a little bit ago about how everything's like the Who's line. Yeah, everything's made up and your points don't matter, because what's the whole point of of playing if you can't compare yourself against your team or against the enemy team, or more importantly, detect if there's a cheater in the game, because you would never know without a scoreboard or a kill feed, proper kill feed like there was originally when the game launched. Yeah,
and that was the concern that we brought up as well early when the game came out. I'm like, how is someone supposed to know? Like you can watch the kill feed in game, and if everything's headshot, but it's like, how attentive you have to be to notice that, right? And the average person isn't going to have that level of awareness. They're playing the game to try and survive. They're not
right.
wondering, is this person cheating, or that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, I do agree with the assessment there. It's like, specialists weren't really needed for some of that, right? We've seen in the past how developers have integrated things to kind of change the way that we play the game without changing a lot. Yeah,
Do you think they'll
it's
keep
tough.
with the specialist, Flak, for the next game?
I have no idea. And I say that because so many decisions that have been made with 2042 are not decisions that I would have necessarily made.
I feel like it's taboo now that the term specialist is just like, oh, we got to avoid that.
The objective, appearance to me, looking at this objectively is, like I would not have made those things. I think the pushback that they received from the community probably illustrates that people didn't really want them. At the same point, now that we have this system rolled out and we can see how these guys work, and the game is getting positive press like this, I think that maybe they're going to point to it and say, well, we didn't get it right the first time, but we got it right the second time. And, look, specialists work, maybe not the way that we initially intended them, but this proves the community will, tolerate or perhaps even embrace the idea of specialists. And of course, the big driving force behind their use in the first place was to sell cosmetics for them. And I get that from a business standpoint,
Right.
um, at the same point here, like looking at it, people have this idea of like, well, if, the game is more successful and we sold more cosmetics and, whatever, that we would get more maps and stuff. And I'm like, no. This is
Yeah.
live service in 2022, 2023, and I just don't see that changing. I think the bigger concern to me isn't necessarily specialists. It's will 128 players stay, or will it revert
That's the
back on
question.
that to me, I think, is a bigger issue. I think specialists, I don't think we're done seeing them. Partially just because it's like, yeah, it's going to be part of the monetization model, and if they can make it work, like, that's great. And I think it works relatively well right now. It's still not the way that I'd roll it out if it were me, but um, it's there and it kind of works. The bigger concern for me is that 128 versus 64, because I look at it, I'm like, I do not like the 128 compared to 64, and it's a playability issue, and it's like, it matters not to me if I'm playing as, XYZ specialist. It's whether or not I'm having fun. And, 128 players for me is a chore.
Oh yeah.
Because there's just so much happening. Nothing is predictable. It's just, throwing a bunch of people into a box, and like
Yeah.
you expect something organized to come out of it, and it never does.
So now that they're redoing the vanilla maps,
Mm-hmm.
have you enjoyed any of the remakes that have come out?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right.
I have enjoyed quite a few of them. Um, I will say there's one that I didn't really enjoy that much.
Is it Kaleidoscope?
Kaleidoscope, I actually don't mind.
Oh, okay.
I think that one improved a lot with the changes that they made. It's still, a really big map, and it's just difficult. Um, the most recent one, Breakaway.
The snow one, the snow map.
I'm not a fan of how it is now. I like the old version of the map. But
Really?
all of the other ones I liked, to my recollection anyway here. I'm very tired, dad brain. But the other ones that I can think of, I liked the improvements that were made. And certainly they were less drastic of changes than what we saw with Breakaway. Breakaway saw some pretty significant changes in terms of what's out there, how it's organized, objective locations, how the map flows, all that kind of stuff. And I'm just not a super big fan of the way it is done.
Do you try both versions of it, the 64 and the 128?
Yes, I
Oh, so
have.
neither of those, huh?
The 128 version I actually like more than the
Okay.
64 player version of that. Um, that's not really to say that I like either of them. I just dislike one less.
Okay. I know Grav, you had some issues with the breakaway map too, huh?
I mean, balance wise, it's a far better. I thought it was a drastic improvement over the original. Yeah. There's one other thing in this article I kind of want to bring up here as we
Sure.
There's the last sentence, the last paragraph of this article says, quote, "The only shame in it is that just as Battlefield 2042 is entering its prime and player numbers are on the rise, which it is, DICE is winding down on new stuff. Season 4 Specialist Blasco will apparently be the game's last. There will apparently be a year 2 with at least one new map and more cosmetics, so at least we'll have that. I'm just glad, until whatever's next for the series, there's finally a great modern Battlefield from this decade." Last sentence aside, because it's the only one from this decade, there is kind of this goes back to that Battlefield 4 argument of, if you launch a game really, really rough, and you give it time, 6 months to a year, we're still in that current state where, God, the game is drastically better, but it's not great, right? There are still so many things that are busted. The countdown timer on the vehicle spawn doesn't work right now. You can play on flags, and the flag timer, you can't even see who's on flags with you right now. It's so many. The annoying movement bug where you drop or you grapple and you just die instantly. You fly into things and you just die instantly. There's still so much that needs to be fixed.
I've got this one bug that keeps happening and it drives me nuts. And I don't know if that says something more about me or the developers, but I have this bug where, like, you know, you're sprinting and for whatever reason, like, your sprinting movement of your hands just stops and you're just running and the gun is just like this, and I hate it.
That's been there since launch.
I have to switch weapons
that's been
and
there
then
since
switch
launch.
back to it, and I've died so many times because it just can't handle it.
Yeah,
visually,
it's the tack sprint. You're supposed to be doing the tack sprint, and your gun just so straight
and
right.
It's just there.
Right, and so
it's usually after exiting vehicle. Usually, it'll stick.
But
in front of you.
But this argument of, well, if you're going to release a game at launch, that's rough, right? If this is becoming the norm, and if it's taking 6 months to a year to improve your game, are we not using a Battlefield 4 as an example where clearly the game had a long life, well into BF1 and BF5's lifespan of, the player count kept rising and rising and rising, and it became a beloved game. Mm-hmm. Why are we cutting support after barely over a year? I mean, I'm happy that we have Season 5, instead of saying, okay, yeah, we'll spend 6 months to a year fixing the game, and then we'll pump more content into it. Because as they did say, player numbers are on the rise, and this is actually a fact. We have seen, even on just as far as public records go, the Steam player count for Battlefield 2042 has reached a quarter of what it was at launch, which is pretty substantial numbers. I mean, yes, we have the free PlayStation players and stuff, but even if we assume that there were 10,000 people concurrently on Steam, we have to assume that on Origin and EA Play there are far more than that. And then on console, we have to assume that there's far more than that. So the player count is definitely on the rise, and yet we're almost moonlighting the game here. And at what point does a developer say, well, maybe we should start pushing more content after that year? Maybe does this game deserve more content at Season 6? Or does the next game kind of need that extra post-year content bump?
I think it depends on how well they're capitalizing with their monetization, in terms of, not only obviously selling the game to start with, but, getting that after purchase kind of dollar, right? Where you're looking at, okay, the cosmetics, right? Are people buying those? And it's like, there may be a lot of people playing the game, but if they feel no attachment whatsoever to any of these characters, and they're not buying cosmetics, that from a business standpoint is a problem. And I look at it, I'm like, I don't know why cosmetics are done the way that they are, because I look at it like very little of it appeals to me. And I'm not saying that from the point of view of like the idea of cosmetics doesn't appeal to me. It's just what's out there does not. And it's always been like that, from Battlefield 1 to Battlefield 5 into 2042. I don't feel like DICE is very good at making appealing cosmetics or embracing the aspects of what they have built to capitalize on that. Like, you look at 2042, like, there's a story involved with this, and it's like, I see the cosmetics, they have nothing to do with the story. Like, I don't care. Like, tell me about the story. Like, you have an opportunity to expand upon the lore of the game and to tell me more about these characters. And you're like, here's generic outfit number 1, generic outfit number 2, and it's like,
why didn't they go with the nostalgia factor?
I don't know.
Why not a BF4 emblem, like a little charm or something?
There's some things like that. There's a little bit of a nostalgia factor there with some of Irish's outfits, but In general, no, going back to the original kind of point of the topic here, it's like there can be people playing the game. If they're not buying cosmetics, it's not, generating the profit that it needs to generate. So they're going to look at it and say, okay, well, let's move on to the next thing. Let's kind of take the lessons that we learned here and try to get it right next time. And I think for DICE, it's less of an issue of like, oh, the cosmetics. It's more of an issue of like, let's get it functional out the gate here, and meet the community's expectations at launch instead of trying to kind of work back, which is what we've seen for, as we've mentioned it many times during this podcast, but kind of like rough start, ending good,
Other stuff.
Yep. So, okay. So we had a little hiccup with the recording, and that's okay. So the follow up thing we were talking about was what makes money in a Battlefield game, and that first thing I was mentioning was what, with regard to Battlefield Premium cosmetics, 2042 has done them far better than Battlefield 5 or Battlefield 1 did. But the real question is that making them money? Is that the real draw? And is that comparable to what, say, Counter-Strike or Call of Duty, is that in those games, it seems like that's part of the game's culture these days, right? Having
Yeah.
these really expensive items that make the developer money. Whereas in Battlefield, that's never really been the case, and we're just trying to, it feels like DICE is trying to force that in just as a way to make a little extra profit, since the old way of doing things was the premium model, BF4 or pre-F Battlefield 1 and prior. And that is one significant difference between BF5 and 2042 and Battlefield 4, is that at least with those premium model games, you could pre-order the game for $100, $110, or you could buy the base game for $60, and then later down the road, these DLC packs would come out every 5 to 6 months or less, and that would include guns, vehicles, and a full map pack of 3 or 4 maps per thing. Or in the case of Battlefield 1, there were 5 or 6 maps per DLC pack, and that was kind of wild. That was a wild experience, and that had great value, and people were kind of almost forced to buy these if they wanted to continue playing the game with everybody. And of course, DICE's rationale was, we want everybody playing together, we don't want to split communities. And that's part of the reason why they went over this system. But is that the better money-making model that keeps content going? If we look at just at least the past 2 games, the evidence, the experience seems to show that the premium model was far better for getting us extra content in the game. Maybe not as good as getting long term, and not maybe more long term support in the long run too. How do you feel about that?
I think when you look at premium, I think premium strength was in its like defined deliverables of like, here's what you're going to get and here's what you're paying money for. With 2042, right from the beginning, it was always kind of a question mark. You look at it like, okay, if you're gonna, buy the, extra edition or whatever, we look at what's coming down the road. They're very vague in what the deliverables were going to be. And I think we look at 2042 and you look at Battlefield 1, for example. Definitely a better experience for the player with Battlefield 1, because you get the maps, you get all this other stuff. Like, I get it, definitely not the most profitable thing for developers, because when you look at it for them, right, it costs a lot more to make maps than it does cosmetics. So it's very much, and that's why I said a little bit earlier, 2022, 2023, like one map per season. They can sell as many cosmetics as they want, and it's still always going to be one map. Okay, you might get more seasons of something, whatever. But that is something that I see as a big problem. And looking at it for 2042, I think some of the criticism has been on like the cosmetics and like, does the 2042 player base embrace specialists and the idea of cosmetics and whatever? And like, I don't have a problem with cosmetics. I would buy them if I felt like it was warranted, and that's I think the crux of what DICE and EA need to improve is the fact that, and I think if we remember this right, they had kind of disabled like some of those purchases and things early on until the game got into a better space, right? Again, things that we forget. Um, but looking at it, it's like you want people to buy cosmetics. I don't think the bulk of Battlefield players have a problem with that, but they're not going to do it if they don't feel like they're getting their money's worth, or that there's the game is still going to be relevant in 6 months. So if
Yeah.
you're churning out like the absolute minimum of in-game content, um, what is the impetus for me to spend money on cosmetics? And I just think that, even though the player count numbers are going up with 2042, the community confidence, the consumer confidence is not there. And what that translates to is like a lesser value for the cosmetic items. So it's like they're asking them out. You're like, oh, I'm not going to buy it if I don't know if I'm still going to be playing this game in 2 months,
Exactly.
because I don't know what they're going to do. Um, so I think DICE needs to clarify that quite a bit. And talking for the next Battlefield game again, like lay it all out. Like tell us up front what you're going to do. Like, and I understand that's there's some legal things with like declarations and whatever. There's
Yeah.
a bunch of like stock market stuff that they can't, uh, that prevents them from clarifying some of that stuff. I still think there are ways to telegraph it, and another bigger problem here with this is that, I think they're trying to telegraph some stuff. And the communities over here, like, we've been burned many times before. Like, we don't believe that. We don't have the confidence in, what it is you're telling us. And again, I think it's improving, but it tends to be evidence-based stuff of like, if you say something and you deliver, okay, we're going to be more apt to, believe you when you say something, and maybe, back the game uh financially. But, as it stands, I am not surprised if that's not selling as well as it could be.
And that's always been my experience as well. I've always felt that if I'm going to commit to putting real money on top of the base game price, in terms of skins, that I want to know that I'm getting value for my money. I don't want cheap skins that look similar to every other character. I don't want skins that, hey, look, they changed the color palette on an existing skin. I don't want, hey, they copied the exact same mask from one skin onto another. I want something that looks very, very different and unique. A good example is some of the Boris skins, the new Dozer skin where he's got like the skull mask. That's very cool. That's very unique. But there needs to be a lot more of those. And the other part of it is I'm not willing to part real money for skins if I don't feel like I have a commitment to the game long term. And
Yeah.
and that's one thing. Like if you tell me the game's only going to have a year and a half lifespan, do I know that I'm going to be playing it
Even if you
in that time period? It's like I
even
don't
if you
know.
tell me that it has a year and a half lifespan, does it?
Exactly, and there's no guarantee that I make it that far too. You have to commit and make sure that game is good. Yeah, I might play it on and on and off, but I want it personally. I want to make that game my main game for a long time, and that's the only way that I'm going to do it. And if you can't commit to improving the game and providing content for multiple years, I'm not going to spend real money. And that's and that goes back to the map question. I will spend $15, $20, $30 per 5-6 months on 3 or 4 maps because that is going to genuinely make my experience worth it in that game. And so to me, that is a bigger draw for Battlefield than it would if any other franchise.
Yeah, and that's there's a lot of factors that go into that decision, right? We have this, I think, idea that we look at something, we're like, oh, that's cool, and money just flies out of our hands, right? And I think maybe it's representative of Battlefield's kind of aging demographic. I don't know, because I don't think, personally, I don't feel like Battlefield is, oh, it's a boomer shooter, like that kind of stuff. But it's like, we have multifaceted reasons for purchasing things, and you have to appeal to all of those sensibilities. I think a younger generation that's coming into some of these games is very quickly adapting to the landscape of them. And if you're not going to be delivering, if you don't have a good track record uh, of this, right? Right. And here's the other thing, like we're talking about Battlefield here, but people are getting burned by other franchises all over the place. They're getting burned,
Yep.
so like those are other learning opportunities for them. I'd really like to see Battlefield push against what the bulk of the community is doing in that regard. And I've said it for a long time, and especially with 2042, I think Battlefield 2042 kind of tried to imitate too many other people instead of trying to be its own thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the franchise is valued enough from the point of view of like, this is a very game changing, shaping product. And it should lead more than it follows. And I don't know, maybe there's data that doesn't back up what I'm saying, but at the same point, like you won't know unless you try. And 2042 played it too close to other games out there in the media landscape. So yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
the
know.
speculation just went wild. People were just thinking, oh, well, there's reports and rumors saying that it was, gonna be originally a battle royale, and that's why there's things like this, and that's why the maps are like this. That's why the player count was maybe high at one point, and so on and so forth. But anyway, I like to change the topic a little bit here and ask a question to Flak here. About a little bit less than a month ago, you tweeted out that, well, in response to another tweet from Brad Hutchinson from EA,
Yeah.
looking to hire a new Battlefield Global Community Manager, and you pretty much asked yourself the question to apply or not to
I,
apply.
I did, didn't I? I asked that question. I said, to apply or not
So
to
what
apply?
happened?
I did apply. So
Oh,
we'll have to
okay.
see what happens with that. It was actually a rather interesting scenario because anything like that comes with like big changes to your life and the rhythm of that and that kind of stuff, and you got to wait that a little bit. Um, but I had finally made up my mind when like 600 people liked the tweet, and I was like, well, damn, I guess I have to do something. I can't just like I can't leave that hanging there. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna apply. And then I go to apply and the job listing is gone. And I'm like, oh no, oh no, what am I gonna do? And so I wound up contacting this is very I don't know if it's a flex, right, from the point of view, but I sent a DM to Marcus Leto, and I was like, "Is there any way that I can still apply for this?" And he's like, "Yeah, let me connect you with
Oh,
somebody."
wow.
So I was able to get my hat in the pot, but we'll see what happens. I don't know.
Did they contact you back?
They did. I'll say that they
Oh,
did.
shoot. Okay, okay.
So
Juicy
we'll
stuff.
we'll see what happens
Well,
with
be
that.
sure to keep us up to date on that. I think you'd be a pretty good fit for any type of community manager, really, for Battlefield. I mean, you got all the knowledge and everything. Even going back to play testing and showing off some behind the scenes stuff back in the day. And
Yeah.
I think you'd be a really good fit
Well, and
moving forward.
I think too, and I've hinted at this quite a lot through the podcast, but it's like it's about personal relationships and like your relationship to the
Yeah.
game and to the developers and like that kind of stuff. And for me, that could be a lot stronger. And I feel like for many people, they probably feel that way, where like they don't feel seen or they don't feel like the developer is listening or communicating or any number of those things. Um, And there's just such, I've been told things in my life, where it's like, wow, when I sit down and have a conversation with you, like it feels earnest, like you're actually interested in what it is I'm saying, and I'm like, well, that's because I am. It's one of the blessings and curses of something like ADHD, where it's just like if I'm focused on this, nothing else exists, right?
Right.
Um, And so, for this, I think there's a lot Battlefield can do from a community standpoint, but we talked about, things like confidence in the game, confidence in the developers. There's a lot of work to be done there. I would really like to do that work. So we'll see what'll happen.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of your fans or people replying to your tweets, like wondering, uh, you know, what did you play 2042? Like in the beginning, like did you
No,
play test it? And
no,
you said that nope, ghosted,
no.
something like that, right?
Yeah, and that's a whole nother side of the conversation, that relationship between Battlefield and content creators, and something for a different time,
Mhm.
probably. But yeah, the early days of 2042 weren't great for anyone, content creators included. So,
Yeah. Well, last point I wanted to bring up was, the future Battlefield. People like Marcus Leto, they have a brand new team there developing. Wait, are they developing another team for in
I
Seattle?
don't know.
For what is that all about? There's like
So
two sub
Seattle
teams now
Seattle is
in
Ridgeline
Ridgeline.
Studios.
Ridgeline,
So
yeah.
we know that they're doing that, and there's something with a campaign, but again, like, we don't know
And
exactly what's what. We've got 3 studios now. You've got Ridgeline, DICE, and you've got Criterion, I think?
Ripple effect.
Ripple Effect.
Ripple Effect, yeah.
Ripple Effect, yeah. Um, down in LA. And those are the Battlefield studios right now. So there is not a lot out there in terms of what they're doing. I know Ripple is doing single player focused stuff, but at this point, it's like what that means is anyone's guess. Is it part of 2042? Is this going to be its own thing? Is that going to, conjunct with a new multiplayer experience from one of the other studios? I don't know.
It feels like another Hazard Zone thing again. Like,
I
oh, we're
I
making
don't know.
another separate thing going on. And then Ridgeline saying, oh, hey, Marcus and his team are doing the single player portion of it. But then we hear another article saying that they're splitting that and having someone else do like Ripple Effect doing some of the campaign. I'm like, well, okay,
No
well, at
idea.
least they're doing something. So
I have no idea. None.
yeah. And that's the thing. That's the mystery of what are they gonna do? We always ask these questions. Are they gonna keep specialists? Are they gonna do
Well,
128 players? Are they gonna do all this other stuff?
I look at it like there is opportunity in chaos, right?
Right.
And there is
Yeah.
a whole lot of chaos happening in the FPS market right now. So it's like we're looking at, we're somewhat lamenting 2042 and, praising it that it's figuring stuff out, and people are, really coming down hard on Call of Duty right now. And I'm like, there's just so much opportunity
Yeah.
for
But
Battlefield to just, come out of nowhere. I hope it does. 'Cause again, I
yeah.
don't know what they're gonna do,
Well,
but
for 2042, we knew something. We knew it was gonna be modern. We knew it was gonna be a big game. And then that secret, with a secret mode would end up being Hazard Zone. That kind of
Mhm.
flopped. And I know they can't do that again. But right now, yeah, as you said, all we know is that we have a campaign, and that's it.
That's it. That's
That's it. That's the
that's
thing
it.
going forward. So it'll be interesting. What I like so far for the future of 2042 is that they're sticking with another season, yet, no more new specialists, which I kind of get the argument around that. But we are getting some sort of like hybrid Battlefield 4 map with the
Mhm.
settings, and they showed some concept art that looked really pretty in the mountains or stuff. Like, I'm glad they're doing stuff like that, but like how much more of this are we gonna get? How much time are they gonna
I don't know.
buy?
I don't know. I do think it's very smart on their part to go beyond, I think, what was initially expected.
Yes.
We had pretty low expectations after
Yeah.
launch and the issues associated with that. So we were looking at like, okay, we're only getting X amount of specialists, probably going to get like 4 maps, and then plug pulled.
Yeah.
And so with the announcement of like, oh, there's another map coming, I'm like, oh, okay. My confidence level in the developers went up a little bit, even if we were, like we heard they're used to with Battlefield 1, like 5 maps, every few months or something like that.
Yeah.
It's still something that's like it's beyond what I had initially expected, so that's good. Um, will they continue that? I don't know. If the player count keeps going up, you look at it like right now is a great time to be putting out new content if you're Battlefield. A lot of people who have fatigued from Call of Duty and some of the other shooters on the marketplace, like Tarkov, for example, providing a different experience. And that's the thing here. Again, Battlefield not embracing what it is. It's like they want a different experience than Call of Duty and Battle Royale and, you know, extraction shooters.
Yeah.
And Battlefield 2042 is just sitting there like, hi. Like I'm a little bit slow, but I'm here. Um, it took us a year to get to that point. But it's there. And it's available. And again, as you mentioned, player count is going up. There's some factors involved with that, but if the game continues to do well and improve, I think support will continue for that. But it also depends on what the other three studios are doing, what the plan is. When is the next Battlefield going to come out? I think the earliest things we've seen rumored is like 2025, which is probably appropriate. I don't know if I would
Yep.
expect it necessarily next year.
Announcements next year is what I expect.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't even want it next year. Yeah, with this
I don't
history,
want it. No.
I
Yeah.
want to
Exactly.
push it farther. I don't care. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of us have that opinion because of past experiences where we're like,
Yep.
yeah, hold up, let him cook, right? Like, let them work on it. Get it out the door where it's fully fledged, everything is functional. Um, we said it many times before, but everybody gets one chance to make an impression, and if they don't do it on the first one, it's very hard to get them to come back to it again. And I think we're seeing some of that now, but it's only because it's free, or there's nothing else to play going on, or they're mad at Call of Duty, or any of these other kinds of things. So I'd much rather the first impression of stuff be a good one. So yeah, I would say let it cook.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be wild if they went for another historical game? Like that would
I
blow
would
your
love
mind,
that.
right?
I would love that. I'm very curious where you're going to go from this near future standpoint here. Are they going to go modern? Are they going to go, historical? I still,
2142 sequel.
yeah. I mean,
God, I would
you
love
could
it.
do that. I don't know if that would be a good idea. I think
I don't know,
historical
yeah.
games. I think if you look at what Dice has done, in the past, Battlefield 1 was a huge risk. And I think they showed that they can deliver and it works. And, frankly, I would love to see Korea. I'm gonna keep talking about Korea.
I know, yeah.
But the thing is, nobody does it. Actually, a return to Vietnam wouldn't be that bad either. Um, just from the standpoint of, I'm sure it'll be different if you tell it with the gall and the seriousness that you need for that setting, right? Um, I think it'll perform as long as it's done properly and could have just the exact same groundbreaking, earth-shaking change that you got out of something like Battlefield 1. Because if it comes
Yeah.
out of nowhere and it's unexpected and it just assaults everything you think about historical shooters, I think people
Yeah.
react well to that. So
It'll be a massive risk. And just look at the team that's behind Battlefield now. Did they ever go into historical shooters or historical type games? I don't know their history. Maybe you might know a little bit more about them, Flak.
Well, one thing I can say about Leto running Battlefield is that he understands emotional connection to games. And I think that is a tremendous asset because that can be used to guide a lot of very important decisions regarding development and game direction. And, I think if they're smart about that, um, it'll make a big difference in whatever they
Yeah.
come out with. And you look at it, it's like, yeah, some of the stuff is a risk, but so is trying to elevate a game to something beyond, oh, it's another FPS game, like build that emotional connection.
Yeah. I think people are just right now. They're like, it's so obvious they're gonna make another modern game or like a sequel. Like, it's just they can't risk anything else. They can't. It just watch them do that. Watch them just throw a curveball at us because Dice does that a lot.
I mean, again, it's
And
what they need to do. They need to do their own thing. They need to step
don't
out
be
and forge their
surprised.
own stuff.
But
So it could be a Bad Company game, right? We
Yeah.
totally didn't even
Be
bring that up
surprised.
there.
That
I,
was for 2042 was even rumored too.
I
Go ahead,
think
Grab.
I think the biggest thing is that no matter what they do, and it doesn't matter what era they choose, the community what they want is they want a complete Battlefield game. They want it in the old school style, and they just want it done well. Like they don't want to have all these hiccups and disasters from the past several years now. That's all they want.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's something I don't know how realistic that is, because it kind of comes with the territory of like Battlefield games tend to be ambitious in the scope of what they do.
Right. But what I'm saying is stick to the formula that you know works. That's what, don't go crazy off the beaten path. That's what people are tired of with regard to Battlefield anyway.
Yeah. And I think 2042 good example of that in both, seeing how far off the beaten path they went and how far they had to come back onto it. And
Yeah.
hopefully that journey there is showing them the direction they need to keep going.
Yeah.
It's taken a while to get there, but I think positive sentiment is good. We're seeing a lot more of that. Is stuff perfect? No, absolutely not. But at least maybe the community is starting to feel seen a little bit, and that they're being listened to. And I think that's as valuable as anything else that comes out for the game.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why I started this podcast years ago was because Battlefield wasn't doing one. No one was talking about Battlefield 5. Community managers weren't really, they're just talking about the updates, right? They were onto something at the beginning of Battlefield 5 where they were playing with the community members and showing off the new patch and showing off the new expansion with the Pacific expansion. And it was all great. And then dead silence, like just a few weeks after that. And there's no more of that. And now what do you see now? An official Battlefield podcast running pretty much every week, every Monday. And it's a resounding success already. And they're answering, maybe at first they weren't answering the tough questions, but in these later ones, they're starting to answer more and more of those tough questions. Even as something as a good example like all chat, and they're actually addressing these things and bringing it to the forefront. So that's something. Yeah, their whole journey coming from the beginning of 2042 and actually sticking to fixing the game and addressing people's concerns. And we're seeing these fast patches too. They're like, oh yeah, we saw that. We were listening to you.
Pace is definitely quickened for those.
The pace is quickened for sure. And I don't know. I think that's a good place to end the podcast for the week. Thank you, Flak, for giving us your insight on all this stuff. Good luck on community manager. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully there's positive stuff to report. If not,
yes,
I'll be right there on YouTube doing more shorts and other videos and just continuing the grind and trying to, I say it right, fill in the gaps between the developer and the community, and just trying to be a positive part of that conversation.
Excellent. Well, it's good to be back. I haven't talked to you in 3 years, so it's good. Good.
Hey, I show up to your Twitch stream sometimes, and I make I make your thing do the fart noise every time I'm in there.
A classic. It's still there. I'm gonna.
So what you're saying is that's what I need to add to my channel. Got it.
Yes.
If you want me to show up, yes, that's what you need to do.
Yep.
All right, good stuff. GraViTyXIII, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you guys have a great week. You can find Flakfire in the links down below. They'll be there. YouTube. No streaming planned, right? I know a lot of YouTubers are starting to think about doing the live stuff.
When I get around to it, I get around to it. I like things scripted. I like to be precise about things. And I don't currently have a lot of time. If stuff changes in the future, then I'd say, yeah, probably doing some streams. and that kind of stuff. But for the moment, yeah, YouTube
Okay,
Shorts.
good. And you can find Gravity. He streams as well. All the links are down below for me and Gravity. And don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel here. And we're also on all podcast platforms. So go check those out as well if you like that. I think we reached a milestone of like over 200 downloads already for the Battlefield show. So that's pretty cool. And thank you for the support on that end. Yeah, go check it out. Let us know what you think. Leave us a review and a rating. That seems to help in the algorithm over there in podcast land. But over here as well on YouTube, leave a like, all that good stuff. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming by. Flakfire, Gravity. You guys have a fantastic night, and we shall see you soon, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.